is the Jake for the State podcast, and this is the call for every red-blooded, God-fearing, liberty-loving patriot to prepare yourself, take your position, stand your ground, and advance the cause of freedom. Let's go.
All right, guys, welcome back. My next guest is Miss Saundra Traywick. Welcome to the show, Saundra.
Thank you.
If I can say that right. Show, Saundra.
It's a tongue twister. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You bet. Well, thank you. And you've been, you're right in the middle of so many issues, and so there's a lot to get to. Let's start with donkey milk. It's how we first connected.
Right.
And right now in Oklahoma, there's actually legislation working its way through the process, addressing this issue of donkey milk. And for so many, at the first sound of donkey milk, it draws looks of disbelief, of curiosity, of what the heck are you talking about? Tell us a little bit about what you guys do with donkey milk.
Right. So we started milking donkeys for our daughter when she got an autoimmune disease that attacked her brain. It was called Panda's disorder, and it causes literally overnight OCD, rages, separation anxiety, all these different things. She lost her ability to do math, read, all kinds of things. And we did a lot of research and a lot of prayer, and the Lord led us to donkey milk. And so now we have one of the only donkey dairies in the United States, and we're also the first to import donkey milk to the United States. And originally there was no law about donkey milk in Oklahoma. Obviously, why would you need one? And last year, the FDA was forcing the state to put in a law to regulate our little farm. And so once that law goes into effect, we would no longer be able to advertise our raw donkey milk. So we are now putting in a counter law that would allow us to advertise our raw donkey milk, which is freedom of speech, and it's a basic right that we should have without having to get a law to do it. But that's the way things are right now. So everything's going good with that.
In what way was the FDA seeking to regulate donkey milk?
So, for one, they got a hold of our freeze-dried milk and held it for 7 months, and then made us send it back because they said it was mislabeled, made us change some fonts and things on our box, nearly bankrupted us. And the state then said we could not advertise our raw donkey milk, and that will be the case if this other bill goes through. Because it was currently, before it was cow milk and goat milk, there was nothing about donkey milk. But they're going to change that. And if they don't, then the federal government's threatening to take away our USDA grade A status, which would mean Brahms and Highland would be at stake. And we like Brahms and we like Highland. So, we have to change things in order to regulate us, in order to appease the federal government. That's the way I understand it.
Wow. Well, okay, so rewind just a little bit. You said that they had a question about your label, and your efforts to correct that almost bankrupt you. Okay, so tell me more about that, because I'm curious about the process, but I'm also thinking that points to a point of sensitivity for small businesses.
Oh, yeah.
That, hey, we're not talking about a massive corporation or anything like that. It's a small family farm, and something as small as label regulations could influence whether you survive or not.
Oh, absolutely. So it was actually about the same time that I was drawing a lot of attention to the humaner issue and some corrupt...
To what issue?
Humaner. Biosolids, literally human waste mixed with toxic industrial waste. So they call it humaner or biosolids or sewage sludge, and they put it on farmland. And I was bringing a lot of attention to that. And I was working with Senator Shane Jett to bring in some laws to regulate that. Originally, we wanted to just ban it, which it should be banned. And suddenly we were in a hot mess and had the state and the federal coming after us. So our imported milk was held for 7 months. And when they hold your product, you cannot import anymore at all. So it shut us down for 7 months. All the children that depended on us did not have our milk. And we're the first and only we're importing to the United States. So during that time, we couldn't get anything done. We couldn't sell our product. It was a drought. Our hay prices went through the roof. So we had our raw milk, but then we were simultaneously being told we couldn't advertise our raw milk. So both of our businesses were at stake, because if you can't advertise, you're out of business.
Yeah.
So that's the short version. But they came
Okay.
back and said we needed to use ounces instead of grams, and change this font, and has to be in this order on our box. All of the, I mean, and so we completely redid our box and brought it all back, and have not had any issues since.
Okay. And you said that took 7 months?
Yeah. And they actually tested our milk to infant formula standards, which it was labeled not for infant use. So that was not correct, but it completely passed, was totally clear of anything wrong with it. But they held it for those whole 7 months. And by the time they gave it back, it was past the expiration date. So we lost around $70,000 in sales.
Wow.
Yeah. For a
Wow.
small business, that's a lot.
Oh, that's huge.
Yeah.
And you believe that you're calling attention to the humanure and biosolids is what flagged the FDA to start inspecting your milk?
There's no way to prove any of that. So
Sure. It just happened about the same time, coincidentally, huh?
it's a little suspicious. We
Uh-huh.
had years before, we had been on almost every TV station in the state. We had a giant billboard on Broadway Extension advertising about our donkey milk on one of those news stations. So we've had national press, we've been in Southern Living magazine, all of these things, and we have never had an issue, because we always said we will not break the law. We do everything above board. We bring it in through customs. We always go through FDA inspections. We do everything right. And that was one of our things. How could someone trust me to give them a good product if I'm lying and breaking the law? So we refused, and there was nothing.
And so you passed all their tests, and currently we're working on legislation here in Oklahoma that would pertain to advertising still, right? Is
Yeah.
that what the legislation is focusing on?
Yeah, it has passed Senate committee and House committee, and right now it's headed to the House. So that would allow us to continue to advertise our raw donkey milk.
Okay. And this has implications, like you said, for larger businesses like Brahms and Highland.
Well, the implication would be, if they don't change the law to include hooved mammals, which was us, then the FDA has said they would take away our USDA grade A status as a state. So it really puts our state in a bad spot, because they have to regulate our little 38 donkey dairy, or risk Highland and Brahms and their USDA grade A status. So, it's federal
So I
overreach.
assume we're seeing some lobbyists from Brahms and Highland active at the Capitol, very interested in the outcome of this particular piece of legislation.
Right. And our bill that allows us to advertise is completely unrelated. If we can advertise when our bill goes through, and they can still.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm still very curious about donkey milk, and I know many of our listeners are as well, but I'll just refer them to your website to learn more about it. I think it's fascinating. And I know we could probably speak for another hour on all of the cures and testimonies of people who've been helped by donkey milk. We've looked into pandas as well, for our family, people that may have been diagnosed with this, and so I'm very personally interested in this. And that we've talked before, we're going to have to get together
Absolutely.
and sample some and try it out. So, but I want to switch over to this other issue that you're very entrenched in, is the issue of humanure, and I've never heard it called that. I've been referring it to the biosolids, but it's very connected to human waste that's collected and then spread out on farmland.
Right.
And so on its surface, that kind of seems like, okay, a little gross, but manure is manure. But when you think about what might be in this human manure, pharmaceuticals, waste from around the city, then we get into some more complicated issues. So tell us some more about biosolids and humanure.
Well, I call it humanure because it grabs people's attention, and that's what farmers call it. And then I explain to them, okay, this is also called biosolids. I think they gave it the name biosolids to sound more benign, like something organic. Sure. But, literally in Oklahoma, there is a facility that melts people down and flushes their remains into the wastewater treatment center. And that's allowed in Oklahoma. So imagine that. Human bodies that may have had cancer or, tons of morphine are being melted. And what are they using to melt them? And then it flushes down into the wastewater treatment center, which then inevitably would end up on our farms and ranches. So Oklahoma is one of 13 states that allows growing produce for human consumption in this waste. And I have been for years trying to get it stopped.
Say that again.
Oklahoma is one of only 13 states that actually allows anyone to grow produce for human consumption. That means for children in their schools, carrots, tomatoes, potatoes, in human waste. So Midwest City is selling theirs as compost, and they do not have to tell anyone that there is likely PFAS, which is forever chemicals. It's what's in Teflon, what's in firefighting foam. It's pretty much in just about everything that people are flushing down the drain and not thinking about it. And
PFAS.
yeah,
PFAS.
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 Yeah,
so many concerns about these. Like you said, forever chemicals, because they just don't break down.
Right.
And from what I've read as well, is they move relatively quickly through the environment, making their contamination hard to contain. And even at extremely low levels of exposure, they can impact your health negatively. And so
absolutely.
Very concerning, the PFAS. And you're saying that certain cities like Midwest City here in Oklahoma, now you're saying the city sells this compost, or they allow this compost to be sold?
You can look up Midwest City compost, and there's pictures of, like, last time I checked, it was pictures of growing vegetables. And I know people who got compost from them to grow their garden in. And so these people don't know what it really is. And they're growing their heirloom tomatoes and growing everything organically. And the soil itself is full of contaminants, from antibiotics to pharmaceuticals, drugs. Half the time people they do half a bottle of drugs and they flush it down the drain. But even if they're taking that whole prescription, it's flushing out of them into the waste. And so it's ending up in this waste. And the only thing they do to treat it is put some lime on it and let it sit a while. And then they call it safe and put it out on farmland, or sell it to people to use in their hoop house to grow vegetables for children for their school, or to sell at your farmer's market. And then they say they're selling it organically. And the farmer truly, if they're getting it and don't know, it's because our state doesn't require them to tell them. And I mean, we have our donkey dairy. We will not buy hay from anyone around here, because historically Oklahoma City and Edmond have dumped their waste in eastern Oklahoma County. So we are very, very careful. We don't buy from anyone who's ever used human error on their place. And what's happening in Maine right now, and Michigan, and actually in Fort Worth right now, there is a case where this community had human error dumped around them. And the neighbors to the farm where they were dumping this waste suddenly started having cows die, fish die, pets die. They have tumors. Their water is contaminated. Their ranch is ruined. And they're suing Synagro, the company. And I believe they were also suing their DEQ. So Synagro, they said, should have known that it had PFAS in it. They should have been watching this, and they shouldn't have dumped it on the neighboring farmers, which then gets in the water and contaminates everyone's water. Synagro is the same company that Oklahoma City uses to regulate and distribute their waste. Not regulate, distribute. So DEQ issues the permits. And we know that we have state legislators that use this on their property. So we don't have representation for these rural areas. And what's happening right now is there is a House Bill 2305 that, if it's enacted the way it's written right now, will give exemptions from all liability to the municipalities that do this, to the landfills that take anything with PFAS, and to the farmers who accepted it. So those legislators who have been using human error are giving themselves an out because what's coming down the pike is anyone that took this, anyone that distributed it, this PFAS are being declared a Superfund waste. And instead of saying we're not going to dump this on farms anymore because all of these farms will be declared Superfund sites, they're saying, oh, we're in trouble. We know we've already contaminated stuff, and we're going to put in a law that will make sure that they're not liable.
Now, explain Superfund.
Okay, so what's happening in Maine is these farms, and some of them did not take it, but there's water is contaminated. Some are literally organic certified farms, and they're coming to them now and saying, your land is only good for wind turbines and solar. You cannot grow any food on it anymore. You cannot hunt on it anymore. They're finding PFAS in the deer, in the fish, and it's everywhere. And so I have people from Maine reaching out to me and saying, please don't let this happen in Oklahoma. And I'm passionate about this because, and I keep sticking my neck out, because if we don't, everything, all these rural communities, all the water will be contaminated. And so everybody that says, I'm not going to move to a 15-minute city, I'm going to live on the land. You can't live on the land when the land is poisoned. You can't live on rural water when that rural water is giving you cancer and killing all your animals. And one thing they said at this meeting was, well, we have a lot of firefighting foam that we have to phase out because it's so bad. So we have to distribute it and get rid of it somehow. Well, you know how they're going to get rid of that. So what may have been safe in the past is getting ready to be a huge toxic load. And they're going to dump it on farmers.
Are you saying that the firefighters needing to get rid of this foam would simply stir it up in the waste and then lay it out on the farmland?
Yeah, it goes down the drain. Yeah, so if they have...
Are they, is that how they're doing it, is just flushing it down the drain? I mean, looks like there would be regulation against that, is there not?
You would think there would be, but right now, this regulation, there is no regulating of PFAS within this bill. All it's doing is saying, we need to protect the cities. We need to protect the Air Force bases. We need to protect the companies. So that lawsuit in Fort Worth, where they're suing Synagro and they're suing the DEQ for not protecting them, I think they were originally, but they may have changed that. We wouldn't be able to do that. The neighbors who never did anything wrong, the neighbors who said, we're not going to take sludge, we don't want it, and asked their farmers and educated farmers and said, please stop doing this. Or they sat back and said, well, it's their right, it's their property right, and let their neighbors do this and their legislators do this. They're going to be the ones that are screwed. And, our 14th Amendment gives all citizens equal protections. So no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. No state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So what they're doing is they're denying me and my farm protection of the laws, and they're giving these corporations and these special interests and these farmers who have taken sludge that was contaminated with PFAS and other chemicals for years, they're giving them protections and screwing the rest of us. And
well, you said that 13 states allow this.
There's many that allow sludge to be distributed on farmland. Only 13.
Okay, go ahead.
Only 13 allow food for humans to be grown in it. Most of them say, okay, you can grow cotton or you can grow hay or, pasture. But only 13 are depraved enough to have, and we're one of them.
So what about the other states? Are there laws that straight out prohibit this then?
Yeah, so
any food grown on this land?
Oh yeah, other states, they're not supposed to grow food for human consumption in this ever. And in Maine, they have now declared you cannot put any of this, not in Class A, not Class B, you cannot put biosolids on farmland at all, or any land. So my question is, what's happening with the Maine sludge that they knew was contaminated? Because we have a person in our group, which is Save Oklahoma Farms and Ranches on Facebook. And they said they were in Missouri and they saw sludge trucks with Maine license plates.
What now? How do you know a sludge truck?
Oh, if you can't see the license plate, and if it smells to high heaven like death, and if it's covered in crap, literal crap, it's a sludge truck.
You would think that it would be disguised a little better than that, right?
Yeah, you would think. They don't label them.
Now just to go back and to help people understand this process. Now, this sludge, where does it originate? Are we going directly from the waste collection in the cities and the municipalities? Is that where the sludge is collected, or is there a station in between?
So when everything you flush down the drain, everything the hospital flushes, what industry flushes down drains, is all going to the wastewater treatment center. And that's a nice way of saying crap treatment center. And so they put lime on it, and then they dump it on farms and ranches. And
no other filtration?
No, lime. And so lime actually makes it worse to breathe. So people out here get sick. They have respiratory problems, and it stinks for months. I mean, we will drive miles around to not have to drive through it on our way to the city because of the farms that have been contaminated with this.
So you're saying just even driving by the farmland
for months
has such a foul smell?
Oh yeah, for months. Yeah. And they're supposed to incorporate it into the soil. And you can drive by it right now after multiple rains and still see crap on top of the soil. And it's black, nasty. It smells like a combination of metal and death and a gas leak. It smells like hell.
Right. Which, I'm thinking about manure in general, right? And so if we're looking at cattle manure or whatever else might be used for fertilizer, so it would stink too.
No, actually. Right? Okay.
No.
So we have donkey manure on our farm, and you can come to our farm. It does not smell because we have our donkey manure, which we integrate with wood chips, which then we compost properly for over a year. And we don't have flies, we don't have stink, we don't have any problem. And then it turns into this black, beautiful soil that we can use to regenerate our land. So when they put this down, the flies explode, which is disease-carrying, nasty pestilence. It's, absolutely horrific. And they do not properly compost it down and degrade it and get all the water out of it. So it's atrocious. I'm literally about to the point to go and get buckets of it and take it up to the Capitol as an object lesson.
We have to pull a stunt like the farmers in the Netherlands, right?
Exactly.
Or all across Europe.
Yeah.
I say stunt. I applaud their efforts to make a point to preserve their way of life out there. And who knows, it may call for something extreme here. I mean, this is extreme.
Yeah.
If truly the evidence is pointing to this contaminating our food, which is then going to, so these PFAS, the PFAS, forever chemicals, they're absorbed from the soil up into the plant.
Yes.
You're saying?
Yes.
And then we ingest this, our children ingest this.
Yeah.
And then that is essentially remains in our body
forever
for the duration of our life.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was really eye-opening to actually go watch that Senate Energy Committee on April 4th, that meeting, because the head of the DEQ, Scott Thompson, said, the exemption intent is to protect passive receivers, cities, towns, because they have to treat wastewater. We're trying to provide liability protection for cities and towns who have to dispose of trash and run wastewater systems. They are receiving this PFAS in the waste stream. It's in thousands of these compounds. And what we're concerned about is the future liability that's going to be created under the federal laws. So this is the DEQ. I thought that they were the environmental quality department. And apparently they're just there to protect the cities. And it occurred to me last night, because this is keeping me up. The little towns, they're the ones that will be screwed because they will not be able to sue the big cities, Tulsa, Edmond, Norman, all of these big cities that have been dumping on them and they couldn't stop it for years. They won't have any liability. They can wash their hands of it, say, not our fault. Sorry, we put in a law that we don't get sued. We had to get rid of it on your farm. And those small towns will no longer be able to provide water for their people. So if this goes through, the only recourse we have is to sue them fast before the law goes into effect. And we'll have to get everybody involved.
Sue who?
Sue who? Oh, everybody. So we'll have to sue the big cities that did this. Oklahoma City, Edmond, Norman, Tulsa, Midwest City. All of the cities that have been dumping their crap on farmland over the aquifers. And I literally, this may be partly my fault because the last email exchange I had with the DEQ, I told them, we tested our water for PFAS contamination and it had 0, which has to be God's protection because they've even found this in rainwater. We had 0 in our water. I said, so if we ever do have PFAS contamination in our water, who do I sue? Who is liable? The city? Synagro, the corporation that put it down? The DEQ? The state? Who's going to be liable? They never responded to that email, but I guess this bill is their response.
Right. Yeah. And so this bill, House Bill 2305, where is it at in the process again?
Oh, it's passed everything with flying colors, and it just went to the Senate Energy Committee, and only 2 voted against it. So 2 House representatives, Representative Rick West, which we love him. He is so sweet. He helped us with our donkey milk bill. Representative Tom Gann, which I need to meet him. He sounds like a great guy. And yeah, and then Senator Shane Jett, who questioned it highly because he's been trying to get this stopped for years, and Senator Dusty Devers. And they both had great questions and actually tried to get it stopped. And if they can't stop it, they want to change it to be a good bill.
Okay. Wow, very concerning. And, you know, it's one of many issues, but it is dramatically impacting. We're an ag state. We're an agricultural state here in Oklahoma, and we're not alone in the nation. So many other really good ag states across the nation. But you mentioned something, how this might impact the rural community to essentially shut down their ability to make a living on the land. And then what would they be left with? Possibly it could drive them to the cities. And you mentioned 15-minute cities. There's those that roll their eyes at the thought. However, there are those that say it's actually, there are plans implemented, and it's obvious that this is the plan in the future, is to ensure that you have everything you need within a 15-minute radius of your home. And so, you know, if you're driving people from rural Oklahoma to the urban, to the metro, and then we have these 15-minute cities set up and in place. Well, now we're tapping into a larger conspiracy, but, you know, it's something to consider.
Right. And, you know, what's happening in Maine is not a conspiracy. They're telling these farmers, your land is contaminated, and the only thing it's good for is wind turbines and solar panels. They can't farm anymore, and they can't hunt anymore, and they can't fish anymore. And so this is now happening right outside Fort Worth. Those communities, their land is worthless. So what will they have left? Sign me up for a wind turbine lease, which, by the way, wind turbines and solar also have PFAS in them. And the blades, when they...
In the blades?
Yeah. Yeah. So that was, I researched that when I helped my family in Kansas fight, and they did get stopped in industrial wind turbine development. And one of the things I found was that in the NIH documents, it stated that one of the big contaminators, or one of the big sources of PFAS, was the blades on the wind turbines. And if you've looked at pictures of those, there's a reason they go in the landfills, because they break down. So they're going really fast. And the wind and the dust and, everything they're hitting in the air degrades the coating of that blade. Well, it said PFAS are in the coating of the blade. So that comes off, gets on the soil, and then ends up in the aquifer too. And this bill would make landfills not liable for PFAS contamination. So where are we going to put those blades that come off and are degrading? We're going to put them in landfills. So they won't be liable either. And, our rural communities are really at stake here. And we say that we're a ranching state. We are right now. And we have Highland and Brahms. Where are they on this issue? Because one of the first things they start to shut down is milk. They'll test the milk and they'll say it has high PFAS, and you can't get rid of it. You have to slaughter all your cows. The USDA has just put in a dollar amount per cow when you have to kill all your cows because you can no longer milk them.
Wow. Yeah. Obviously, Brahms should have a vested interest in this. And, I look forward to hearing from them.
Yeah.
I'm interested. Do we know if any of these major dairy companies are using any biosludge? Are they allowed to on their lands? Because I know they own hundreds and thousands of acres to support their cattle. So do we know if any of these biosludge, the human manure, is used on their land at all?
They're allowed to. Everyone's allowed to. Some of us choose not to, but everyone is allowed to. And,
ask to find out.
Yeah, ask those questions. I don't believe they do. I trust that Brahms and Highland and the big dairies would have more sense than that and would use their cow manure to fertilize their land, because that just makes sense. If you're a real, yeah.
Well, and an interesting element of this story with House Bill 2305 is curious to find out which of the representatives and senators that voted in favor of this actually use biosludge on their own property, and how would this benefit them? Would it relieve them of any liability?
It would.
And provide.
Absolutely.
So they have this personal interest in pushing this bill through. It definitely, I appreciate your time today and bringing attention to this, because it covers several issues that directly impact the state of Oklahoma and multiple states across the nation. Obviously, Maine is kind of this model, negative in a negative way, of what we don't want to happen here in Oklahoma. I mean, big ag state, but also farmers and ranchers, fishermen all over the state. Obviously, we don't want this negative impact, but in some ways, how are we supporting this and allowing it to happen and kind of slide under the radar? So we don't want it to bite us in the butt later. So House Bill 2305, something we need to call attention to. And I appreciate your time here this morning, Saundra. And I know that we're going to have to do this again and talk more about donkey milk and even windmills.
Yeah. Well, and I would really encourage people to get active, and, they can join our Facebook group, which is Save Oklahoma Farms and Ranches, because if this goes through, we will have to do a massive fundraising effort to hire lawyers and go after them, because until they're held accountable, they're not going to change.
Right. And if you could spell the name of the company that is being sued in Fort Worth that is also operating here.
Right. Synagro, Synagro. Should be.
Okay.
Yeah, so Synagro, and last time I checked, they were still in charge of Oklahoma City's wastewater treatment and distribution.
Okay. I want people to be able to do their own homework and research, and we also welcome any input, any information that people discover in their own personal endeavors and research. So Synagro, if you find out anything is on your radar, just be sure to email me, jakeforthestate@gmail.com. And again, I'll let you give your website as well, Saundra, so people can reach out to you.
So our website is oklahomadonkeydairy.com, and I have multiple blog posts over the years where I've talked about humanure and the issue with all of that. And Jenny White, she kind of activated me to get political, and we thought we'd be able to take care of this through the political avenues. And we did get it banned in Luther, which was huge. And that we didn't realize was such a big deal, but it was even written up nationally and got national attention. But, that just protected Luther. It didn't protect the rest of rural Oklahoma. So
Okay, so what did you do? Was it done through the county to ban it in Luther?
we went to the city of Luther, and Jenny White was the mayor then. And she said, well, the right way to do this, I knew nothing about politics. She said, let's start with the city, get it banned in the city, and then we'll get it banned in the county, and then we'll get it banned in the state. And we had no idea the firestorm we would get just at the city level. I mean, they had California reps coming. The DEQ showed up in favor of sludge, which was an eye opener for me, and how great of a system it was and how safe it was. And it was still, there were some really key people that showed up and spoke. One of them who has since died of lung cancer, Troy Evans, he was county commissioner out in Lincoln County. And his wife believes his lung cancer was caused from breathing humanure.
So what did the representatives and lobbyists for humanure and biosludge, what do they say? Do they deny that these forever chemicals are even in the soil, or do they acknowledge it is and say that it won't impact people and their health? Or what is their argument?
Oh, no. I mean, they literally, this is from the DEQ, Scott Thompson, at that meeting. He said, EPA is making some moves on some of these compounds. They're looking at it under Superfund for 2 of the compounds and under hazardous waste rules for a few of the compounds. He said, we anticipate further action on this, especially like drinking water. We're trying to be defensive and look to the future and try to minimize the effects of this down the road. They're not trying to minimize the effects on the farmers and the rural communities and the small towns. They're trying to minimize the liability of the big cities.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Very concerning, something that we have to pay more attention to, and we can do that because you brought our attention to it. I appreciate that. Let's do it again. We'll talk some more about all of it, but we'll keep an eye on this bill, House Bill 2305, and see where it ends up. And hey, God bless you and all of your efforts.
Thank you. God bless you too.
All right, Saundra. All right. It's Saundra Traywick. Go check her out. All the donkey milk and all that she is doing and saying concerning biosolids and the windmills is definitely something, guys, we have to pay attention to. If we do nothing, then we get what's coming to us. And so there's definitely an attack, whether it's direct or indirect, on us, our farms, our families, our futures. So it's time for us to stand up, fight, continue hoping, praying, communicating, getting together with others who are on the same mission. And that's what we endeavor to do. So let's keep doing that. Saundra, appreciate you.
Thanks.
See you next time right here on the Jake Merrick. See you next time right here on the Jake for this Day podcast.